Let's dive into the EOS R. Now I've had 6 months with this camera, and the EOS R, this represents Canon's first serious entry into the mirrorless market. And if you're comparing simply specs, you've probably already moved on by now. Because from simply an on-paper standpoint, it's not necessarily that impressive. But that doesn't mean that it's not a great camera, and the overall experience with this camera has been fantastic. So I want to talk about it in this video, and because you can see specs online, we're not going to really be talking about specs. We're going to be talking about the hands-on experience that I've had with this camera over the last 6 months. We're going to be talking about things that paper doesn't cover. Because here's the honest truth. When it comes to any other thing, when it comes to buying a car, because I do love cars, you're not just looking at what's under the hood, and you're not just looking at the technical specifications of the car. When it comes to a home, you're not just looking at the floor plan and the space and the bedrooms and all the technical details of how it was built. You want to know where it is and what it's like to drive that car and what it's like to live in that home. And that's what I want to talk about, is what it's like to live with the EOS R. First, I want to talk about what I've enjoyed about the EOS R, and I'm going to tell you this. The #1 reason that I'm shooting this camera has nothing to do with the camera itself. I'm telling you this because I keep getting a lot of people asking, should I jump to the EOS R? I noticed you've been using the EOS R. Should I get it? I'm using the EOS R primarily for the new RF lenses, and more specifically, the new 28-70 f2, which I dub the bulbous beast. This monstrosity of a 3-pound lens is absolutely amazing, and it's kind of a game changer when it comes to zoom lenses. Now granted, Sigma also has one of these, but I love this Canon variant, and paired with the EOS R, it's absolutely wonderful. But bottom line, I love the new lenses. I love what the new mount can do in terms of image quality, in terms of wider apertures, and I love the control rings on the RF lenses. The overall experience is just better. This is the reason that I'm shooting on the EOS R. The next thing that I appreciate about the EOS R is the size, but I'm gonna be honest, Canon puts a lot of emphasis on this smaller body. But there's really only one native RF lens that takes advantage of the size, and that's the 35mm. When traveling, I love taking the EOS R and the 35, and I get a very small and very powerful on-the-go camera setup. Here's the caveat though. These lenses are anything but portable, and when you pair it with one of these guys, you're losing all of those size and weight savings that you'd get in the body. It feels like just any other DSLR at that point. So don't buy it if you're pairing it with these kind of lenses and expecting it to be small and light. It's just not gonna be that. Moving on, I love Canon color science. Now, we've been touting this for years, and it's the primary reason we've stuck with Canon, because it's not that other manufacturers don't put out good colors and that their file quality isn't good. It's just that based on the look of where we like to develop our images and the look that we want to create from our video and our stills, Canon gets us closer in camera to that final outputted product. That's just the simple truth when it comes to our specific style, but it might not be that way for you. But still, it's one of those things that's worth mentioning because it's probably one of the biggest draws, in addition to the lenses, to this camera system is simply the color science. Next, I really love Canon Ergonomics. Now, let's start with the menu design. The menu design is very simple and easy to use. Even if you haven't shot Canon products before, you will find that it's easy to navigate through the menu system, find what you need, set up your custom menus without having to open up the manual, just with some basic previous camera experience. In addition, the button layouts and functionality is wonderful, including the new control ring on RF lenses. Now, this is a throwback to previous generations. I mean, I'm talking about like many generations ago when we had aperture controls on the lens. I love it. I love that they brought this back because it makes for a very quick and handy kind of adjustment when you're on the go shooting, in addition to your shutter speed and ISO controlled with the dial and the thumb dial as well. Now, you can change and customize all of these things to your liking, but in addition to that, we do also get the this little kind of touch bar, which you can customize and do whatever you'd like. So Ergonomically, menu design, you can tell that there's a lot of science that's gone into the usability of the camera, and it's something that you're gonna appreciate when shooting the camera and when you're in on-the-go, quick-moving situations. Now, quick note about the adapter. I have an adapter right here, and what I would say is there's different versions of this adapter, but you can use this to adapt any of your EF glass onto Canon RF mount cameras. The caveat here is making sure that you get the adapter that has the built-in control ring, and I'd also recommend that you get the one with the ND filter as well, because now you have a built-in ND filter. Gone are the days of basically having to carry around lens filters and ND filters and everything to use over your lenses and have different sizes and all that, because it's built into the adapter. This is huge. In addition, the control ring gives you that extra dial which you're going to want to have. I noticed that when I was using the adapter that doesn't have the control ring, I found that it wasn't as easy to adjust my shutter speed, aperture, and ISO because I only really had 2 dials to do it with. So having the control ring makes a big difference in terms of your experience using EF glass on RF mounts. Now, let's talk about video for just a moment. Now, I shoot primarily stills with this camera, but in terms of video, we can now shoot Canon log out of the camera, which is kind of a nicety. If you are a cinematographer and you have other Canon cameras like the C200 that you use as your A cam, then it's nice to have C-Log in this for your video so that you can use this as a B or a C cam. So that's great when it comes to bringing all the footage into post and kind of syncing it up and doing all your color grading and matching up the colors between cameras. I love it. Okay, so let's get to the cons. Let's get to some of the drawbacks of the EOS R. And one of the first things that I noticed from the still side was the frame rate. It's difficult to shoot sports and fast action with this camera. The frame rate just isn't quite high enough. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you're going to have to really time your shots because the frame rate is not gonna give us that whole sequence of images that we can pick out that one perfect in-action moment. Okay, so next drawback is autofocus. Now, the autofocus system itself is actually quite good. You're not gonna go and make a video and put it next to like the latest Sony camera and go, this one has better eye tracking focus. It's really good. I don't know if it's quite there yet, but it is a market improvement from the 5D Mark IV, and it's fantastic when it comes to its autofocus speed and abilities. That said, my issue with the autofocus is the on-screen joystick. I simply don't like the on-screen joystick as much as the physical joystick on the 5D Mark IV. So here's how that works. When you bring the camera up to your eye, you're using that autofocus joystick with your thumb to control where the autofocus goes in camera. The problem is, well, for people like me that have a fairly large nose, I think I'm very well endowed in the nosal region.
It's huge.
Okay, now he's just being rude. Now, if you're using your viewfinder over the left eye, this is gonna be even worse because your nose is directly in front of the LCD and you're gonna hit the screen. Okay, so you can move the focus area around the LCD, but I found that even when it's at the top right and my nose touches the middle or left side, it jumps. So that's an issue, and I would love for Canon to consider us Middle Eastern people that have large noses. You know what I mean? Okay, so let's jump now into the cinema side, and the biggest drawback that everyone is going to talk about and everybody already has talked about, 4K crop in this camera. A lot of you think that Canon is holding this back because they don't want to diminish their Cinema EOS line and they want to preserve, those cameras without cannibalizing other cameras that they want to sell. What I was told specifically by Canon reps is that it's actually a technical issue. They don't yet have the ability to use the entire sensor at a proper frame rate doing 4K without overheating the camera. If you guys will all remember, this was an issue that Sony cameras had a little while back when shooting 4K video. They would overheat quite regularly. So Canon's unwilling to release a camera with that kind of flaw in it. Granted, do we know or think that this is true? I don't know. I don't know if that's just an excuse or if it's an actual technical limitation at the moment. And it doesn't really matter because here's the deal. A lot of people online, including Potato Jet, he actually posted a video showing that 1080p versus 4K in this camera, they looked virtually identical. And both files are really, really nice because again, just like on the still side, there is far more to making a good cinema file than just the resolution. The overall color, the bit depth, the overall dynamic range, everything plays a component, and the files that you get out of this are again really nice on the cinema side. That being said, there's also other comparisons that show this camera is not actually shooting 4K, it's actually shooting 2K and then upsampling it to 4K. And I think that's probably a pretty likely explanation for the fact that the 4K versus the 1080p files aren't quite that dramatically different. But either way, this is a drawback for cinema shooters and it needs to be noted because that's what makes this camera very much more a still camera that also happens to shoot video versus a camera that does both equally well or a cinema camera that also happens to shoot stills. Let's go on. The last big drawback for me on the cinema side is I really wanted to have 1080p at 120 frame rate for that silky, smooth, slow motion. I felt like this could have and should have been done in this camera. So with all that said, what's the bottom line? Well, if you are a current 5D Mark IV user and you're looking for that professional mirrorless upgrade, then wait. There's not a significant reason beyond the lenses itself to switch over to the EOS R quite yet, and Canon has promised that we're gonna be getting a professional EOS R or mirrorless soon. Wait for that because you're not gonna see a significant difference simply in the camera body itself. And honestly, I still prefer, from just a camera body to camera body standpoint, my 5D Mark IV over the EOS R. For those of you that love Canon lenses and Canon color science and you don't have a Canon full frame body to go along with it, then the EOS R presents a really great kind of midpoint full frame camera at a good value and price point, right around 2,000 bucks to jump into, where you can start accumulating and using RF glass as well as your previous EF generation lenses. But if you're invested in enjoying another camera brand and the gear along with it, the EOS R does not, in my opinion, represent what I would call a jump ship camera. It's not that groundbreaking where you're gonna go, okay, I'm gonna switch over this and ditch everything to switch. No, maybe the next Canon mirrorless will be, but this guy isn't it. That's it for our hands-on look at the EOS R. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give us a like. You guys can subscribe to the channel if you like and leave us a comment below on what gear you guys would like to see us review. As always, we appreciate you all and I'll see you guys in the next video.